So forgive me if you don't like theatre and you fall asleep, but this is now the lights have gone down, now your opportunity, as you would do in the theatre, to have like a little snooze for a bit, and then you can wake up after 20 minutes and we'll be on to the poppies, it'll be fine. I began as a biologist. I was going to discover the cure for cancer, and that didn't quite work out. I went to university to Cambridge. I was very lucky to get a place there, and my best friend from school was a keen cricketer called Sam Mendes, and he decided that actually he didn't want to do cricket anymore, he was going to direct plays. And I said, well, you know, I like building things, I've made some tree houses, what, you know, it can't be that difficult, so I'll build some sets for you. So that began a kind of a process where I did probably 30 plays in 4 years. I didn't sleep very much. I drank a lot of whiskey and Mars bars and aspirins to keep going. And I did just show after show. And eventually it became apparent that I couldn't keep up with the biology, and there was too much work to do. So I changed and I did art history. So you had to do one essay a week for art history. My father was an art historian, so I was used to that background. I thought it would be useful for theatre, and I suppose I've always felt, because of that, that I'm not really properly trained. I've sort of managed to have a career by sort of inventing it as I went along. Nobody taught me, there was no course in theatre at Cambridge, and it's the most glorious amateur place that produces nearly all the main directors, a lot of top actors. Tom Hollander was also in my year group, and weirdly it's the arrogance of that particular privileged youth, really, that kind of gets you through. We keep on thinking with Sam he's going to come up against his downfall, his nemesis will happen. When he goes into theatre, it won't work. When he does his first film, it's bound to be a disaster. And I'm going with bated breath on Sunday to see the latest Bond and see what happens. So I managed to. My big kind of inspiration, I guess, was I saw Peter Brook, who's a fantastic, now in his 90s, theatre director. I saw his production of the Margarata in Glasgow. I got to meet his designer, Chloe Obolensky, and she said to me, well, if you really like what we do, you should come and work with us. So I got the amazing chance to go and work with Peter Brook's company immediately after graduating. Now, he wrote a famous book called The Empty Space, in which there's this little quote: I can take any empty space and call it a bare stage, and man walks across the empty space while someone else is watching him. It's all it needs for an active theatre to be engaged. And that's a very pixelated picture of his theatre, the Bouffe du Nord. Why this for me is a crucial space is that you can see here there's the audience on various levels, and this is the playing space, and the playing space comes out into the audience, and you're sharing the playing space with the audience. And actually, all you do need is one person to walk across that space. However, what does that person wear? How do you see them? What are they carrying in their hands? What do those objects mean? Those are the jobs that a designer has, in fact, that we are helping to tell the stories that theatres offer. And through the choice of clothes, through the choice of props, you can build up a story. And I tend to be, as you'll see, quite a minimalist designer, in that I kind of believe in the power of objects, the power of clothes to tell stories. I don't think I should be illustrating the story through the design. And also I believe in the power of all your imagination. I think one of the reasons theatre has endured as an art form is that actually we have such vivid imaginations. The words will turn. Shakespeare can talk about the pounding hooves in Agincourt, and we can imagine that. There might only be 2 people on the stage who don't have CGI, but we can imagine it. And that's endured even now that there is so much technology in theatre and film. So this is where it sort of all began. A little brief history of theatre for those who don't know. This is Edward Abros. I was lucky enough to go there. I was going to be going with a show. It was actually with the Bridge project that Sam directed. The Greek government crashed. They decided to pull the production. I'd already booked the tickets and the villa, so I thought, well, I'll go anyway. And this was the Saturday night when our show should have been on. Sadly, it's a very, very beautiful place. And again, you've got a community of people looking down into a focus space there. Then fast forward to the Globe, the reconstruction of the Globe. And here again you have a stage space, and importantly, audience wrapped right around it, almost in view to people on stage, the groundlings in here, the posher people sitting up there, but fundamentally it's one room with the sky above. What I'm showing you is the evolution of British theatre, or theatre over a couple of centuries. Interestingly, there's a little sketch of the globe there, and here's a sketch of an execution. A remarkably similar kind of thing, and the fact that in those times, actually people were going to see execution on the scaffold and then going to see a show. And actually the chorus in Henry V talks about the stage as a scaffold. And then you've got medical theatres where people are observing corpses. You've got bear baiting where you've got people in little groups looking in. That's the architecture is forcing this on people, but it creates a strong sense of community. And that's one of the things that I'm always interested in. They started moving indoors, colonising banqueting halls and churches. And then this is a sketch of what, I don't know if you've been to it, but the Sam Wanamaker, the new indoor theatre next to the Globe, which recreates the conditions of kind of Jacobean theatre. And there you have a stage, but again, you've still got audience almost on the stage. In fact, the rich people would sometimes they'd pay more to be there, to be in view. And then you've got your people now seated rather than standing in that position. It's a Spanish courtyard theatre. And then we move into Georgian theatre. Again, people still sitting at the sides of the stage, but getting slightly more end on. Moving into the first Covent Garden, the beginnings of the creation of proscenium arch, the idea of actually scenery as an illusion that actually doesn't really begin until around now. You've got painted cloths there, mimicking Greek classical architecture. You've still got audience in little communities, but then you move on to the Victorian, the kind of theatres that dominate our West End. You get Matcham designers. They're beautiful spaces, they're perfectly designed for the sight lines to hit the front of that point. You can no longer in these rooms actually act out or come out of that space because people up here can't see you. You've got orchestra pits that have developed, and there's a kind of separation of what we call the fourth wall has arrived, which is that there is a wall that the actors can pretend doesn't really exist, and that is the window into the world. Cinema carried that tradition on further, and then this is the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, where I was an associate there for 10 years until just last year. I've been working there for about 20 years, and when I first started working there, the main theatre was the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, built in 1932, very influenced by cinema. Completely end-on seating towards the stage, originally nothing at the sides at all, no sense of connection, and like about 30 metres from the back of the auditorium to the stage. And then when I was working there, this is in the kind of late 90s, we started trying to explore how we could get this connection back, how you could start getting your actors back into the room to be more like the conditions that Shakespeare wrote for. So I was looking at creating little thrust stages and ramps that would come through the audience. We do have some at the side here, but that's about as far as you could go before people couldn't see things. We then decided to knock this theatre down. I say we, it was kind of the Royal Shakespeare Company under Michael Boyd in conjunction with a lot of other people, a huge collaborative sort of venture, and a large decision for the board to make about actually closing down the theatre, redeveloping it. Part of the argument was economic, in a sense that a lot of actors were beginning to feel this space wasn't a space they wanted to work in. It was the two people talked about shouting from Dover to Calais, that, to try and reach the back row. So we built a temporary theatre. Only the RSC would do this. We actually built a life-size model of the theatre that we were going to build as a temporary thing. And this is a model of it. It's the Courtyard Theatre. It's still there. I don't know if any of you saw anything there. And we're currently in the middle of redeveloping this. Now we've built our next full-scale theatre to become a studio theatre, rehearsal theatre, and a costume store. I'm heavily involved in that. But here you can see what I would call a classic thrust stage. So in the plan view, that's your stage there. These are your communities of audience in here. We've actually gone back to the idea of creating little kind of bays of people that can react. And what that does is creates a sense of community within the auditorium, that an actor can stand here and recruit this little group of people here as his fellow foot soldiers, or he can turn that group of people against that. He can play with them, and the reaction of those people here, they see it over there and they react to them. It's a room that's alive, when people are communicating with each other and sharing the atmosphere of each other. There's no sense of everyone sitting in, like you are now, standing in straight, neat rows, looking ahead, ignoring your fellow man or woman. So this is the redeveloped Royal Shakespeare Theatre, viewed from the side, and then you can see the little communities that we've got there of people, the thrust stage, actors entering through here and through here. And for a designer, what this does, it creates a sculptural space. It's not a pictorial space. You cannot create a single point of view. So you have to start thinking like a sculptor about that every image that's there that you create is seen from all angles. So what do I actually do when it comes to being the designer of a play and creating a play? I suppose I feel I'm in charge of the world of that play that you, the audience, are sharing and helping to bring to imaginative life. I tend to start by thinking I could set it in the period that the play sets it in, which is, in this case, this is a history cycle that I did in medieval times, or my version of medieval times. I could set it in the period that the play was written, so this is Shakespeare's time, so it's Elizabethan. Or I could set it now, because we are interpreting this play now, so that's Richard III. And now. Equally, sometimes I might look at a play and discuss with the director. It's a very collaborative process about how you come to ideas and how they develop. You might say, well, actually, I think we might set this play in the Spanish Civil War, or this one here was inspired by the Russian Revolution for Measure for Measure, with the Duke being like a failed Romanov emperor, and Angelo almost being like a Stalinist reformer. Slightly rewriting history, if you know the end of Measure for Measure. And then, how do you get into that process? How does the design process work? That's David Oyelowo in the first version of the histories. And I do a lot of research, eventually books, and now a lot online. So you're looking at the world of medieval soldiers. These plays draw some very dark, sinister material, kind of Hieronymus Bosch-like kind of moments happen. There's lots of references of contemporary armour and the kind of things that people would have. But the job of and I design the clothes as well, the job of a designer is not about a reconstruction. It's not about faithfully taking us back to the past. It's about creating strong characters for actors that can work. And if you actually put an actor in genuinely in armour, you won't be able to hear them. They probably die within about a minute because they would just expire from heat. And so you have to find ways of quoting these things. So for this example, this is actually like a linen jacket. We had to take all the linings out and put, because the guy got so hot, but he's got various bits of military kit there, but some modern stuff as well. That's some gloves, carabiners, kind of echoes of actually First World War military I brought in, with kind of gaiters and boots to give me a feel a bit like jodhpurs. I also look at a range of artists from Rembrandt through to Louise Bourgeois, the torturing of animals, the torturing of people. And that kind of translates itself into the play, especially I'm talking about this sculptural thing within the space, into a kind of verticality within the space. Here you see somebody winched out of the floor on a sling, someone else is suspended in there, so the circus skills coming into it as well. But it's an image that everyone can look at from all sides. There's a lot of towers in these plays, and my biological inheritance comes in here, looking at the DNA. And in these particular plays, whether you're the son of the third or the fourth, is in crucial importance. And actually, we gazumped Brian Cox, in that we did a scene using rocks, where a guy came out with a bag of rocks and created his family tree by putting all these rocks out on the ground and working out for everybody exactly who you're related to. So that's what came in here. That's more Louise Bourgeois kind of referencing in the Tate. And then this is kind of photograph that the designers take, which is the glory of rust on a gasometer, the kind of fantastic colours there. And then this is my design process. It's about making, I don't do anything in computer, I'm a bit old for that. And actually I love the accidents that you get when you actually work with your hands, and things sort of fall over, and you can manipulate things. You don't have to try and kind of make it do that on the computer. So these are a 1 to 25 model, so the person's about that big. And I've started with an idea of a kind of tower with double doors in it, a little upstairs bit for I'm the king of the castle, you're the dirty rascal, in this thrust space. And then I'll flick through these very fast. These are the kind of things that happen over a couple of weeks, but trying out staircases and traps, getting even higher, doubling it all up, Bedford Buzzley Berkeley routines, thinking about acoustics, that actually one of the challenges in a space like this is actually how do you hear, and therefore you quite often have to put in reflective surfaces, so that's what this wall is doing there. Getting more and more complicated, trying to link it into the building, exploring the idea of rusty metal, and then maybe sculptural things that might come into the space, so like a big cage made out of rebar. And then this was how this initially turned up in the production, and there's a scene in the Henry VI's where they have to choose between being a Yorkist or a Lancastrian, and it's a red rose versus a white rose. And so it's a really key design problem. The people need to choose a flower, and where does this flower come from? There's a little shrub, kind of whisk on, where things fly in. How do you get it? So we had this cage woven with, and people might spot a future idea, woven through metal and kind of almost like an ornamental gate, and they're plucking them off that. We had this in the previous, and I suppose this is one of the lessons that I've learned, in a sense, is that when you have ideas and you're sharing them, that you have to hold on to your idea firmly, but when it doesn't work, you must let go lightly. And in a sense, it's actually realising the point at which an idea is no longer working and that you have to find a new solution. That's one of the things that happens all the time in my work. And you never know when it's going to happen. You think it's a dead cert idea. Another thing that my main collaborator, Michael Boyd, talks about is killing your babies. And that sometimes you have just too many beautiful things in a show and the superfluous of them, and they're actually getting in the way of the story, and sometimes you have to get rid of them. So with this one, we used it as a cage. It came down, and the second scene after that was in a prison. And what actually happened for the audience was, although the camera here has zoomed in on the man, when you were looking at it, it created a barrier. You couldn't see through this cage. It kind of formed an optical interference, and therefore you couldn't actually hear what the guy was saying, and you lost the sense of the scene. We also felt that this cage hanging over was just too weighty a subject, and nervous members of the audience, like my mother, were just spending their entire time thinking it was going to fall on top of people's heads and not listening again. So we actually, we didn't use the cage for that moment. We did use it in other places. And then I came up with a big spiral of roses that was sort of like red and white mixed together, and it kind of came in. But then when you picked it, it kind of bounced around like a strange spring, and so that didn't work very long. We cut it and put it out in the foyer. And so the final idea was a ladder, again slightly like the genetics, of kind of DNA that opens and splits with the red and white roses on it. And ladders were used a lot in the play, so that's how the kind of idea developed. Then going back to the sets evolution, there's another version there, exploring different widths of towers. I had to find somewhere to put some musicians at the top, getting even more inspired by Louise Bourgeois, probably too much. And then moving to this sort of thinner structure with doors and spiral staircase within it, which actually translated into this. This was the set in the space. There was a beautiful piece of fortuitous happenstance, which is this, what I find rather pleasing pattern of rust. You can almost just see probably that it kind of rays out like a sun's rays. And that happened because I hadn't done that in the model, and the painters had these big pieces of rusty metal, and they wouldn't fit in the workshops. They were sitting outside at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre workshops with plastic all over them, and then we had a summer torrential rain downfall. The rust got in, the water got in under the plastic, created this amazing rust pattern. And to their great credit, and this is where I feel I'm always collaborating with people who take on my ideas and obviously quite often take them further and improve them, is that they left it and said, actually this looks quite interesting, we'll see if he likes it. And so we kept that kind of happening. Then for me, the people within the space are what's important. They're the one, they're telling the story. And it's without them, it's simply just a big sculptural hulk. And this is, I tend to do clothes that are quite simple and quite enigmatic, or symbolic, I suppose. This is Joan of Arc, and the English believe that she's mad. And so she's got these sort of group of three fiends behind her who do a kind of slow-mo video thing where they're kind of echoing her sword blows. This particular actress gets burnt at the stake and then reappears in the following scene through a miracle of quick change, dressed as Margaret of Anjou, who's French. So that's her there in a kind of red velvet that echoed the colour of her fiends. she seduces this guy who's English, and he takes her back to the English court. So she tried the direct approach of attacking him as Joan of Arc, and that didn't work. And now she's trying the subterfuge one, and she gets in as Margaret. She becomes the queen, and he gets elevated to become a duke. And I chose here fabrics that are deliberate. There's the gold, which is obviously kind of the royal fabric, but equally there's a sort of reptilian quality to her, slightly serpentine. There's the red rose of Lancaster that he has there. She later on plays Margaret in battle. This was the same breastplate she had as Joan of Arc. And again here, this is a fabric that suggests militariness. It also suggests a snake. It's a sort of scaly, probably silk brocade. Quite nice to work in. And then there's a kind of football team colour coding that we had to do in these plays because everybody is on particular sides. So you've got brown for the Lancastrians, and then black and silver for the Yorkists, who also conveniently all seem to have red hair, which went very well with the Ross. And you can see Shakespeare's given us this sort of thing of giving them white roses, so we know which side they are, and when they change sides, it's quite obvious. So there's storytelling. And I suppose what I'm saying is that actually costume in theatre is not about real clothes. It's actually about telling a story of a character, especially for Shakespeare. It's not naturalistic. They don't go and change into another outfit for the next day because you would just get too confused. We never have enough money for that anyway. Then there are certain big ceremonial moments, like a coronation there. And then this is a kind of example, I think, of a fusion of design ideas where you've got, this is actually a battle. It's the Battle of Towton, where it snowed and there was so much blood that the snow went red. At that battle, Henry VI wasn't there. He was actually in prison. So this is Henry VI in prison. And we, as the audience, are imagining the battle through his eyes. So he's walking across an empty stage. You hear the sound of arrows, some drums going, feathers started to fall white, and then red ones joined them. So it sort of became a kind of beautiful evocation of the battle. He's then promptly murdered by the future Richard III. And this reflective surface you can see here is blood. So he was murdered somewhere over there, and we had a hole in the stage and someone underneath with a garden pump, kind of pumping up and down, which produced a huge slick of blood, and he was then dragged off in the blood. And then the next king and queen came in, very much like those anti-fur adverts. These are all the feathers left behind from that previous scene, and they walked through the blood, and the whole their trains got sort of stained with blood. So there was a thing where the wardrobe department didn't really like this idea. But we had to work with them. We created fabrics that we knew would wash out. And then this was moving on to Richard III, which is one we were going to do contemporary, and we decided to kind of make the whole space white. And again, we got into the technical rehearsals of this. We tried it out, and it just wasn't working. It was too much like a photographer's studio, and that somehow people looked rather cool when they were just standing there on their own dressed in black. But the minute you put about 5 or 6 people in rags, they looked completely confused and didn't know what they were doing all night. So we ended up cutting the whole idea and going back to the steel, but still going for a contemporary feel. So this is Richard III as a king, same kind of choice of slightly yucky reptilian gold colours. That's him with Queen Anne, contemporary, but again a very simple silhouettes. And then this is the end. This is Edward. Which one is it? I can't remember now. I think it's Edward VII, and the ghost of Henry VI in the back. And then this is Richard II, the Elizabethan thing that I was looking at. I was showing you before. And Bolingbroke, who was fighting against Richard. And we did this at the time of the Blair-Brown conflict. It was rather wonderful that here was the gruff doer reformer that everybody really liked for a bit, and then there was the flamboyant one who was deposed, and within a year we wanted that one back and wanted to get rid of this one. Shakespeare knew what he was writing about. Another repeated sort of imagery of this is Richard II when he's deposed, and it talks about ash being thrown from the windows onto him, and this is sand pouring down on him. And to show that actually how ideas develop depends completely on the circumstance you're working with the collaborators. This is also Richard III, like some of those other ones were. This time the Old Vic with Kevin Spacey and my old mate Sam. And a very different approach to theatre making. What Sam likes is strong visual images for each scene. He needs furniture for people to sit on. He loves symmetry. If you look at any of his films, you'll spot that. And so here you've got a court scene. That one's slightly asymmetric, I'll give you that. And then seeing the video projection there of clouds, people about to be murdered, Scrivener. And then this is Kevin when he becomes king. The set splits open and reveals a giant, very doctored and approved photograph of Kevin Spacey. And the war is created through drums rather than actual sort of fighting. And then in the second half, a kind of more operatic feel. This is the evocation of the outside of the Tower of London. What's interesting about these is I like them as images, but for me it wasn't as good a production. And there's always the kind of lie about my kind of work. You know, it looks good, but was the show any good? That's a horse, my kingdom for a horse at the end. Then this one is one I do with Midsummer Night's Dream with Michael Boyd at the RSC. And this, when I was sitting in the audience for this, and people came in, and the set was just a simple wooden oval, and a woman in front of me, I had to say, "Oh, they haven't really spent very much on the set, have they?" And that was before the show started. And you go, well, you know, actually it's 3 hours traffic of a play, and you have to see what happens. We had, you know, things might happen. It's not going to stay the same. That's the beauty of it. And you're stuck. You're going to be there for 3 hours. And we began this night's dream with it snowing. Everyone's dressed as if it's Soviet Russia. In the play, there is actually a description that the seasons are out of kilter. And then it's not all fluffy, cute fairies. It's actually a world that has been at war. Fairies who are at war, and because they're at war, the seasons have gone helter-skelter. These are the mechanicals, all dressed in the same dog-check suit. And then this is a kind of moment where we transformed into the forest. And this was this courtier here. She came out carrying some little yellow flowers, and then gradually little red poppies grew up through the floor. And initially this was a high-tech solution involving car aerials that sort of went up. But of course they all jammed and went so we ended up with the good old-fashioned technique of people with broom handles underneath the stage pushing them up manually. Basically this guy Philostrati, he stalks her absurdly through this field of poppies. He then gooses her, she slaps him, they start ripping each other's clothes off and become Puck and Peaseblossom. So then you dramatise the transformation from one world to another through actually the actors doing something. And this was my little kind of sketch of what I can